We start with questions to the Secretary of State for Education. I call Cat Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 1.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, my department continues to work with the Office for Students to ensure universities support students in hardship by drawing upon the £261 million student premium.
Cat Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hearing from students from the University of Lancaster and the University of Cumbria, I share the concerns of the organisation Million Plus, which has produced a report, Learning with the Lights Off, which highlights the difficulties around 300,000 students are facing. So can I ask the Secretary of State whether or not he has seen the report and whether or not he will meet with myself and representatives from Million Plus to discuss how those recommendations from the report to bring grant support to students immediately could be implemented by his government?
Secretary of State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady, and I have to say I'm afraid I haven't yet seen the report, and I will ask my team to dig it out and give it a look over. And of course, if she's got specific issues that she wants to bring and raise, then I'd be more than happy to meet her. But alongside the significant funding that we're putting into the student premium to deal with hardship in the student body, of course, many students who are not living in halls of residence or other tied accommodation will benefit from the wider cost of living package that the government has put together.
Sir Desmond Swayne.
They will no doubt be relieved on the grounds of the rate of interest that they're required to pay on their student loans, won't they?
Secretary of State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know that the rate of interest on student loans is a matter of great interest to the Honourable Gentleman, Right Honourable Gentleman, and indeed to his constituents. But the switch from maintenance grants to loans, effectively contingent upon income, has been a success in that we have seen during that period an increase, a significant increase in the number of 18-year-olds, or the likelihood of 18-year-olds from a disadvantaged background of going to higher education. But of course, we constantly keep these things under review.
We now come to Shadow Minister Matt Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been speaking to a lot of students in recent weeks, and they're obviously anxious about the cost of living because while student maintenance loans have increased by just 2.3% on average, inflation has rocketed to over 10%. Accommodation costs up 5%, food up 14.5%, transport costs up 10.6%, hitting commuter students particularly hard. The result? Students face an average funding gap of £439 per month and dropping out. Whilst the government faces a credibility gap in this sector, can the Secretary of State tell us what are students supposed to do?
Secretary of State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I outlined previously, there is £261 million available this academic year to support disadvantaged students who need additional help, and we've been working closely with the Office for Students to make sure that universities do support those who are in hardship. It's worth pointing out, of course, that students will also benefit from reductions in their energy costs if they're buying from a domestic supplier through the energy cost support package that we're putting in place. And we have, as he said, continued to increase support costs for living support for living costs over the last few years. However, as he will know, we do keep these things under review constantly, and an announcement on the uplift for this year will be forthcoming shortly.
2 withdrawn, so we'll go to Cheryl May.
Thank you. Question number 3, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, as someone who was a teacher for nearly 9 years in disadvantaged areas in London and in Birmingham, may I say teaching is one of the most rewarding jobs you can have. In 2020 and 21, saw an increase of more than 4,400 full-time teachers in state-funded schools in England. This has resulted in the largest qualified teacher stock since the school workforce census began in 2010-11. But we know in some areas there is more to be done, which is why early career maths, physics, chemistry and computing teachers working in eligible schools up with disadvantaged pupil cohorts can now claim our tax-free levelling up premium.
Cheryl May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the key disadvantages we have in Cornwall is the relatively high cost of housing. Cornwall is beautiful and people want to live there. But what more can the department do to encourage teachers to come to Cornwall and not other places with cheaper housing?
Well, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend will understand only too well, as a former resident of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Torque, that it too, like Cornwall, is a place of outstanding beauty. And this government is committed to ensuring affordable housing is delivered. So since 2010, over 9,000 homes have been delivered in Cornwall, and in August 2021, we announced £1 billion of funding from our Affordable Homes programme, which will be used to deliver over 17,000 affordable homes across the South West. I'm pleased to also say, Mr. Speaker, that Cornwall is also an education investment area. and has 26 schools eligible for the Levelling Up Premium, including Liskeard School and Community College in the Honourable Lady's constituency. And specialist teachers in certain subjects in these schools can claim up to £3,000 tax-free annually. And finally, Mr Speaker, in March 2022...
Finally, no. You know, it's not a full lesson that we're putting out, just a good answer is good. Right, let us go to Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Disadvantage knows no boundaries, and likewise in Hackney we have huge challenges in our schools. But the government did promise that the starting salary for teachers would be £30,000. How close is the government to reaching that manifesto commitment?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I am delighted to tell the Honourable Lady that if for the next rounds of independent pay body review I have asked for the commitment, this government's commitment to the manifesto commitment of £30,000 a year starting salary be honoured for 2023-24.
4 withdrawn, so I will then go to Jack Burton.
Number 5, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We are reforming technical education to ensure that all post-16 students have access to technical options that support progression and meet employers' needs. We have introduced T-levels, a new high-quality programme designed with employers that will give learners the knowledge and experience needed for skilled employment, further study including higher education or higher apprenticeships. We are also reviewing existing qualifications that sit alongside A-levels and T-levels to ensure they are high quality and lead to good outcomes for students.
Jack Burton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We have some fantastic creative and manufacturing industries in Stoke-on-Trent, but often many of these industries say to me that they struggle to fill some of those vacancies. So will my honourable friend look at what more we can do to help incentivise some of those vocational skills to get our economy growing?
Minister.
I know that this is of great importance to the honourable friend. I know that many different sectors face skills needs and challenges. This is why we are investing in skills through T-levels, apprenticeships, skills boot camps and free courses for jobs, giving people of all ages the opportunity to obtain the skills that industries like these need to support economic growth.
Corinne McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. There's potentially a huge number of good green jobs that young people could go into, whether that's retrofitting homes, installing heat pumps, restoring wetlands. But a lot of young people don't even know that these jobs would exist, let alone know the pathways to getting into them. So what is the government doing to open their eyes to these opportunities?
I thank the Honourable Lady for the important question. I'm very proud of our government's record, what we're doing at the moment. Regarding green jobs, we are really investing in this not only for our T-levels, our apprenticeships, our higher technical qualifications, and also with our boot camps. So never before has there been so many opportunities to engage with green industries, and we're also, on top of that, working closely with these industries to make sure that they are the heart of what we do.
Minister Toby Parkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The most popular high-quality vocational qualifications currently offered at Level 3 are BTECs. Now, last week, the Education Select Committee heard evidence about the 6,500 Level 3 students and 7,500 Level 2 students whose results were delayed this year. The Honourable gentleman from Harlow was rightly critical of the failure to reveal the number of students affected at the time and all the uncertainty that caused. So can the Minister tell us, when did she first know how many had not received their results? And why did she not insist that that number was made public?
Minister.
Thank my honourable gentleman for his question. As the honourable gentleman knows, I am a strong proponent of BTECs, having been a BTEC girl myself. The department, did inform us, and we acted on it straight away. I'll have to get back to you with the exact date. Get back to the honourable gentleman with the exact date. I'll get back to you. But if we look at the whole landscape, we are ensuring that it's simplified, and most importantly, that those courses lead to good outcomes for students, ensuring that people have a bright future.
Diane Abbott, because 6 withdrawn.
Question number 7.
Mr Speaker, we are focused on raising educational standards for all pupils, irrespective of their ethnicity.
Diane Abbott.
The government will be aware that whilst many ethnic minority groups have actually narrowed the gap with white pupils, and in some cases actually overhauls them, some groups continue to underachieve, particularly black Caribbean boys? And at a time when there are so many skill shortages, what is he doing to ensure that all of our pupils achieve their potential?
So State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to say that the Honourable Lady is right, and there are a number of minority groups that now do outperform the average, not least the largest group of the black community, those who would identify themselves as black African, who do outperform the average in a number of ways. She is right, though, however, that there is underperformance by a number of black Caribbean boys, black Caribbean pupils, mainly boys, and I certainly undertake to her to try and investigate why. However, I'm sure she would agree with me that while there are external factors such as disadvantage that can influence educational outcomes, also the standard of the school and the standard of the teaching that those pupils receive can often overcome many of those barriers. And if she hasn't already, I would urge her to visit the Michaela School in Wembley, which I visited 2 weeks ago, which is seeing extraordinary results from a very mixed and diverse community in a very challenged part of London.
Let's have the chair of the Select Committee, Robert Halford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the key reasons for underachievement of all pupils and pupils from different ethnic minorities is the absence of children from school. And at the start of term this September, there was just 93.5% attendance in all schools. That means, looking at the arithmetic, that children lost up to an estimated 17.6 million hours of learning. And usually at the start of school, we'd expect to see high rates of attendance at around 98%. I know that the department have appointed 13 attendance advisors, but the fact is we have over a million, 1.7 million absent children and 100,000 plus so-called ghost children. Can my right honourable friend explain what he's doing to get these children back into school so that the 1.7 million persistently absent children are safely returned to the classroom?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the chairman of the Select Committee is absolutely right to push hard on this issue, because it is one that is completely vital to the future, not just of those children, but of their families as well. And he is right that following the pandemic, we have seen a reduction in attendance. One of the silver linings, though, coming out of that of the pandemic was the fact that we do now have real-time attendance data for a majority of schools. We're working to try and complete it for all, which allows us to focus in our efforts on driving attendance in those schools. And in particular, I'm very keen, given my previous job at the Home Office, that police and schools and local education authorities should work closely together to make sure that those children who aren't at school and aren't findable at home are found somewhere out of the community and brought back.
We're meant to work through the chair, Secretary of State. If you could, it'd be very helpful, because at least then I could hear you as well. Deirdre Broke.
Question 8, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In September 2022, the Secretary of State for Education held introductory meetings with his counterparts in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The meeting produced wide-ranging discussions, including the cost of living issues. Education is devolved, so additional support in this regard will be the responsibility of the devolved governments in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
Mr. Speaker, the government's lead advisor on food issues, Henry Dimbleby, has condemned ministers' response to the National Food Strategy, warning it could mean more children go hungry. And just yesterday, the head teacher of a multi-academy trust reported children breaking down and crying because of hunger. In Scotland, all children in primary 1 to 5 receive free school meals, and from the 14th of November, all eligible children up to the age of 16 will be receiving the Scottish child payment of £25 per week. As this cost of living crisis deepens, when will this government match the actions of the Scottish Government to support children in most need?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've provided £1.9 million funding in free school meals and over £2 billion in pupils premium. We are there to support disadvantaged students, and that's also why we're reforming education, to give those from disadvantaged students a good start in life. Maybe the lady and her counterparts in the devolved nations could also learn from what we're doing here in England.
SNP spokesperson Carol Monaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But of course, 1.9 million is not even going to touch the scale of the problem that we have here. Recent research from PwC found that for every £1 invested in free school meals, there was a return on investment of £1.71 savings to the state. Now, given that many families have moved beyond just about managing into just about surviving, when will this government match the Scottish Government's commitment to universal free school meals for primary children and transformational Scottish child payment?
Minister.
As former Education Secretary there quite rightly said, it was our idea. And now, let's just have a look at what funding we're giving to Scotland. The devolved administrations are well funded to deliver their devolved responsibilities. And you've had a block grant funding of an average of £41 billion a year. Now, also, the government extended free school meals to more groups of children than any other government over the past half of a century. We remain committed to supporting the most disadvantaged children.
Robin Walker.
Number 9, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government remains committed to improving uptake of EBAC subjects, specifically for languages. Building on our modern foreign language pedagogy pilot, we will establish a national network of language hubs from next autumn 2023. We are also expanding the successful Mandarin Excellence Programme, as well as exploring an Arabic language programme.
Robin Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The EBAC, pioneered by my right honourable friend to my left here, has been highly successful in driving uptake of mathematics, sciences and humanities, but there is much further to go in reaching our targets for modern foreign languages. What progress have ministers made on the development of an Arabic language programme for schools and on ensuring that more pupils have the chance to study world languages?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend raises a really important question about the availability of more world languages, which are important for our young people as the United Kingdom operates in a global market. So I can confirm that we are exploring an Arabic language programme which will aim to build on the existing infrastructure of Arabic teaching. And also, our Language Hubs programme will also increase support for home, heritage and community languages.
Jeff Smith.
Question 11, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Department is committed to attracting and retaining the highly skilled teachers we need by investing £181 million in this year's recruitment cycle, including training bursaries and scholarships worth up to £29,000. We are also delivering $500,000 training opportunities, reforming teacher training and delivering on this government's manifesto commitment of £30,000 a year starting salaries.
Jeff Smith.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that sounds very rosy, but teacher vacancies are up 240% since 2011. The latest NEU poll, 44% of England's state school teachers plan to quit by 2027. 22% of them in the next 2 years. And it's particularly difficult for experienced teachers, those teachers who may have 20 years' experience, are leaving the profession. So what steps is the Minister taking to address pay, stress and an unmanageable workload which is driving the most experienced teachers out of the profession?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that great question, Mr. Speaker, because it is about being a teacher that's so important and positive, and it's a shame the honourable gentleman used this opportunity to be a bit negative about the profession, because when we're trying to recruit and retain staff, what we need is people talking up what a great profession it is to work in. I know I'm being shouted down by the opposition bench, but not a single year of teaching amongst them all, yet 9 years over here and I get shouted down for simply being someone who worked on the shop floor. The lessons should be learned from the past. But let me tell the honourable gentleman what it is that we are doing. We're making sure the honourable gentleman's clear the £30,000 a year starting salary, which is amazingly competitive with the private sector. We're going to have the £181 million in scholarships and grants, including £29,000, for example, in physics. And we're going to make sure that retention and workload, through our workload toolkit the department has gone, which has so far reduced workload on average by 5 hours.
We now come to Shadow Minister Steve Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wow. I mean, this government has no ambition for our children's futures. Soaring council schools in deficit, attainment gap at a decade high, and the schools bill ripped up. But, Mr Speaker, recruitment and retention of secondary school teachers, not just Prime Ministers, is in crisis. Estimates of DFE data suggest the government is set to fall 34 percentage points below its recruitment target. So can the Minister explain what specific action he is taking to stop the rot and how he will fix his own government's failure on this?
Mr Speaker, I'm very glad to see the honourable gentleman was let out of detention by the Standards Commissioner for his very naughty letter that he sent only recently regarding me. But let me be very clear, Mr Speaker, that the honourable gentleman is making a point.
I just say, we want better taste in the House. Being a minister, he's no longer on the backbenches, so his rhetoric needs to be of a minister. I know he's got that standing and capability. Come on, Minister.
Mr Speaker, I am making the point very clear. The honourable gentleman has the opportunity to stand dispatch box and talk up the teaching profession, talk up our schools, talk up the reforms that since 2010 and 2011 that has seen the attainment gap narrowed until, of course, the global pandemic, which has affected every single sector of our economy, has gone sadly in a way that, of course, we don't want, but we are putting the effort in through the National Tutoring Programme, the 1.3 billion in recovery premium, the 650 million catch-up premium. This is an awful amount of money that's going into the system, as well as making sure that teachers now have a high-quality mentoring, most importantly, initial teacher training round and early careers framework that's giving them support they need.
James Grundy.
Question number 12, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Local skills improvement plans place employers at the heart of local skills systems, facilitating more dynamic working arrangements between employers and training providers to make technical education more responsive to employers' needs in their area. All areas in England now have a designated employer representative body in place to lead on devising their plans.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Would my right honourable friend agree that institutions such as Wigan and Lee College that work with employers to create bespoke qualifications that lead directly into in-demand work are an excellent blueprint for other educational institutions to follow?
Well, yeah, Minister.
I know my honourable friend is a real advocate for colleges in his area, and I thank him for his question. Now, local skills improvement plans will forge stronger, more dynamic partnerships between employers and providers that will enable training to be more responsive to local skills needs. The relationship between Wigan and Lee College and local employers aligns closely with the aims of this improved collaborations, and is a great example of how stakeholders can work together to meet local skills needs and help people to get good jobs. And I'll be delighted to visit to see their great work in progress.
Mr Speaker, I don't know if the Minister was able to go to the Association of Colleges reception recently, but it was a very good way of meeting all the college leaders. Would you agree with me, though, there's got to be much more joined-up thinking between an activity between colleges, between schools and universities? We were talking about green skills. There seems to be no curriculum at 16 that meshes with 18 and 21. Talk to colleges and get something moving, please.
I thank the honourable member for his question. I was at only a reception this week for Love Our Colleges. Now, I'm a true advocate, and one thing I'm passionate about is a parity of esteem between vocational and technical qualification and also academic qualification. Please put your trust in us as a government, because we are fully behind all sectors, and we are continuing dialogue between colleges, schools, universities, and I think that, as I said earlier, there's never been more options open to young people, and I'm completely proud of our record in government.
13 withdrawn, 14 withdrawn. Let's try 15. Andrew Lowe.
Question 15, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, this government is committed to the protection of freedom of speech and academic freedom in universities. The Higher Education Freedom of Speech Bill will strengthen existing freedom of speech duties and introduce clear consequences for breaches, as well as introducing a duty on universities and colleges to promote the importance of freedom of speech and academic freedom.
Andrew Lowe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How my right honourable friend and his team address the concerns of many that mandating university students and staff to complete training in contested theories such as unconscious bias, like the Radcliffe Department of Medicine's implicit bias course or the University of Kent's Expect Respect course, is worrisome, especially given recent data from King's College's State of Free Speech report of the increasing reluctance of students to engage in challenging debate.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know the honourable gentleman recognises that universities and colleges are independent organisations, but however, I share his concern that where opinions, belief or theories that are contested are presented, they should not be presented to young minds alone. And the context in which they are created, and indeed the arguments for and against, should be presented to young people. Indeed, it is the duty of those who are tasked with the education of young minds that they should give them the widest possible sense of perspective on all these issues.
Andrew Slew.
Number 16, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are investing in programmes that support science, technology and digital skills so that learners of all age, including my young son who's up in the gallery supporting Mummy today, are equipped to fulfil careers in the likes of computer numerical control operations. We are delivering on this through Objective, through our skills reform programme, which is putting employers at the heart of our skills system.
Andrew Slew.
Mr. Speaker, we need around 1 million more engineers in this country. Amongst them, we need computer numeric control operators who can earn around £50,000 on the shop floor. I have engineering businesses who are desperate for them. Can we really get on top, making sure we have this talent pipeline so people are well paid and these engineering businesses can flourish?
Minister.
My honourable friend makes a very valid point. Now, we understand that things are uncertain as your two colleges are merging at the moment, but what I have to say is the Level 3 Engineering Technician Apprenticeships provide CNC content, and there are over 140 providers that deliver this training, including 3 who have national coverage. But I would also like to look in at our technical T levels to ensure that we have some of this content in there too.
Charlotte Nettles.
Question 17, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the Government is committed to supporting schools, which is why we're investing significantly in education, with a £4 billion increase in the core schools budget this financial year. This will help schools facing the challenges of inflation brought about by global events.
Nettles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Schools across my constituency are facing extraordinary financial pressures, particularly in SEN settings where costs per pupil are higher, and in older schools where a government failure to invest in the school's estate means higher costs for heating and repairs. With inflation running out of control, which is an effective 10% cut to this year's budgets in real terms, senior management teams are desperately worried that they won't be able to balance the books, especially with higher demand for things like breakfast clubs as parents feel the pinch. Can the Secretary of State please inform us what representations he has made to the Treasury to address this crisis in education funding?
Well, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the, as I say, significant increase in the schools budget last year, we are obviously monitoring the impact of these global inflationary forces on schools across the whole of the country. And we're in constant conversation with leadership unions and indeed head teachers about their finances. Perhaps she doesn't know, but we acted immediately, for example, when it became clear that schools were going to be severely impacted by the rise in energy costs, to make sure that they were included in the energy bill relief scheme. And we continue to have dynamic and ongoing conversations with Treasury colleagues about the importance of school funding.
Question 18, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the Department is working closely with stakeholders to monitor cost pressures on schools. Our generous 2021 spending review package in 2021 is supporting schools with a £4 billion increase to core schools funding in this financial year alone, and we are protecting schools with the Energy Bill Relief Scheme. Schools and trusts remain responsible for setting their own budgets, and the Government is also assisting families directly, as well as the energy price guarantee for households. We're providing over £37 billion to help households in the greatest need, thanks to our new Prime Minister.
Data from the National Association of Head Teachers survey shows that 90% of schools expect to run out of money by the end of the next school year. I've spoken to head teachers who say that while school debt is escalating, demands on schools continue to increase, and the energy crisis is only one element of the funding crisis in education. So can the Minister tell me, how can the Government expect schools in my constituency to deliver standards and provide additional support when they can't afford to survive?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his important question. As I said in my earlier answer, Mr Speaker, we have this £7 billion from the course to 2024-25 through the spending review. There's the £5 billion in catch-up to maintain standards and make sure that those disadvantaged pupils in particular get that high-quality support, particularly in tutoring, so they can catch up on their lost learning, because we know the pandemic had that detrimental impact, as well as obviously schemes that members opposite introduced through the school uniform, which the government has adopted and sent out as guidance to make sure the cost of overall uniform comes down. We are taking this all very seriously. I'm more than happy to meet the honourable gentleman and head teachers in his local area to hear from them directly and see what other support we can give.
19 and 20 withdrawn, so let's move on to 21 with Ian Levy.
Question number 21, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We are making a transformational investment to support children and young people with SEND by investing £2.6 billion between 2022 and 2025. This will deliver new places and improve existing provision for children and young people with SEND or those who require alternative provision, as well as establishing up to 60 new special and AP-free schools.
Leave it.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Over the last few months, I've been working very closely with some schools in some of the most deprived areas of Blythe Valley. Although schools are doing an amazing job, there is a need for an increase in special educational need provision. And that's to support the most vulnerable young people. Whilst there's a new special educational needs school to be built in Blythe Valley, progress is slow, and I feel more could be done to address this situation. Would my right honourable friend please agree to meet with me to see how we can progress this matter?
Minister.
Well, I share my right honourable friend's commitment to improving special educational needs provision in Northumberland, particularly in his constituency. The department is working closely with stakeholders to develop a sustainable solution. The opening of the new free special school has encountered several challenges, but we do expect to deliver the school places in 2023 academic year. As part of our investment into school places for children and young people with SEND, Northumberland are receiving £3.7 million from the fund between 2022 and 24, and I will happily meet with my honourable friend to discuss.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I recently held a round table of head teachers in my constituency. We talked for almost 2 hours, but sadly very little of the conversation was about teaching. Instead, we discussed serious issues around recruitment and retention of staff, inadequate funding and severe pressures on budgets, online safety, mental health, theirs and the children's, and SEND pressures. What is the government doing to ensure that all schools have the resources they need to provide pupils with special educational needs and disabilities the support they need, whilst also being able to maintain high-quality teaching and manage the huge range of other pressures that they face?
Minister.
Well, I thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the honourable lady for her question. As I mentioned in my earlier response, we are investing £2.6 billion over the next 3 years in new spaces for SEND and alternative provision. We have also implemented £1.4 billion in high needs provision capital allocations for LA, but also £9.1 billion, increasing by 13% in higher needs funding. But also the honourable lady will know that we launched the Green Paper on SEND and AP back in March, and we are currently looking at those responses, and we're hoping to respond by the end of the year.
Shadow Minister Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome the Minister to her place. She inherits the government's SEND review, which has caused widespread concern amongst parents of children with SEND that it is seeking simply to reduce expenditure and erode the rights of parents and children to access the support they need. As the Chancellor trawls for departmental cuts to pay for the government's reckless economic experiment, can the Minister confirm that the SEND review will not be used as an excuse to erode further the resources that children with special educational needs and disabilities rely on?
Thank you. Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I can confirm to the honourable lady that the SEND and AP Green Paper, the SEND review, was not and is not an opportunity for us to reduce the support and needs that children with special educational needs require within this country. As I've already outlined to the lady, we have increased our high needs funding to 9.1 billion, which is an increase of 13%. And we have also designed a package to support the delivery of any of our reforms, which is a £70 million programme which will test and refine measures in order to make sure that children get the support and education they need, but also parents feel that they also have a choice in the matter and they are well supported.
We now come to Topical Secretary of State. We have Patricia Gibson to offer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There have been four... Question one.
Secretary of State, thank you.
Mr. Speaker, this week we are celebrating National Care Leavers Week. And as we celebrate the many success stories, we must also keep working to identify and stamp out all and any abuse. I was therefore shocked and saddened as I started to read the report of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse last week. The scale of abuse and exploitation suffered is horrifying. The courage of those who came forward will help improve services to protect children. The inquiry was established by the government 7 years ago. Since then, we've taken action to make sure children are better protected, and I am determined to continue to improve children's social care so every child has a safe and loving childhood. My right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, will be making a statement on this matter shortly.
Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There have been 4 Secretaries of State for Education in the past year, as 9 out of 10 schools in England say they will run out of money this year. The dogs in the street know that this government is so unstable as to be unfit for purpose. Does today's Secretary of State for Education agree with me and his honourable colleague from Christchurch that the new Prime Minister will face an ungovernable and riven Tory party and that a general election is the only answer? Otherwise, things are going to go from very bad to very much worse.
What's it got to do with education? I don't think it has. In which case, let's go to Elliot Colburn.
Mr. Speaker, Carshalton and Wallington parents are still coming to me in huge numbers because, in my surgeries, because Lib Dem-run Sutton Council is either refusing their child an EHCP or issuing them an inappropriate one. Indeed, DFE data shows them as the highest rejecter of children across the country, with nearly half of all children being rejected for an EHCP. So can my right honourable friend update me onto the progress of the SEND review so that no child is left fighting for an education?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I am sorry to hear of the issues that my honourable friend's constituents have been having and the distress that this is causing to those families. In March, the government published the SEND and Alternative Provision Green Paper, which sets out a number of proposals, including some on the educational health and care plans. These proposals aim to improve the experience and outcome for those with SEND. The consultation has closed, and we plan to publish an improvement plan later on in the year.
Now come to Shadow Secretary of State Bridget Phillipson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, may I begin by welcoming the 4th Education Secretary in the last 4 months to his place. He has, at least for the time being, the very best job in government. Mr. Speaker, back in May, Internal Department for Education documents described some school buildings as a risk to life. After the Conservatives crashed our economy, does he believe that there should be further cuts to school capital budgets?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her welcome? I think she's absolutely right. It is the best job in Whitehall and indeed the most important department in Whitehall, given that we hold the future of the country quite literally in our hands. She is right that the comprehensive survey that the department undertook of school premises did reveal some alarming problems, and we are working closely with local education authorities, multi-academy trusts and others to try and rectify those. She will also know that we've invested significant amounts of money in the school rebuilding programme, and we continue to have conversations with the Treasury about how we may be able to do more.
Bridget Phillipson.
Mr. Speaker, because the Conservatives crashed our economy, school leaders are now warning that they will be forced to cut back on equipment, on sport and on the very staff who enable all of our children to achieve and thrive. Last month, I set out Labour's fully funded, fully costed commitments to end tax breaks for private schools and to invest in breakfast clubs for every child in every primary school in England.
if the Secretary of State genuinely believes in delivering a great state education for all of our children, why doesn't he adopt Labour's plans?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Lady will know, we already do have breakfast clubs in quite a number of schools across the country, targeted at where they are most needed. And our approach on these issues is to do exactly that, to look for the vulnerabilities, look for areas that require assistance, and then target funding accordingly. But I hope she's not going to, in the start of our hopefully long relationship across this dispatch box, I hope that as well as doing her job of challenging the government to do ever better, she will recognise some of the very significant achievements that we've seen in education over the last decade, not least the fact that 87% of our schools are now good or outstanding, and the fact that we stand at the highest level we ever have done in the International League tables for literacy.
Oh. Maggie, through.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite years of extensive planning and hard work, the leadership of the team at Brackenfield Send School in my constituency continues to be frustrated in their efforts to secure post-16 designation for the school. This means that students leave at the end of year 11 without the opportunity to undertake further education to prepare them for adulthood. Will my right honourable friend urgently investigate this matter with Derbyshire County Council to ensure that post-16 education is commissioned at Brackenfield without further delay?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do sympathise with Brackenfield School's predicament. Supporting children and young people with SEND to live fulfilling lives is of paramount importance. The local authority is responsible for deciding on the age range at a maintained school. But I share my honourable friend's concerns and will investigate what is going on.
We now come to SNP spokesperson. Harold.
Mr. Speaker, the head of the Russell Group has said that the window for the UK to associate to Horizon Europe is closing fast, and that failure to move forward with the UK association would be bad news for research. What assurance can the Secretary of State give to researchers that funding is imminent and that research will be protected at all costs?
Dave.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I'm sure you will have heard from other ministers, we recognise that science and technology is critical to our future economy, and much of that originates from research within universities and other research bodies. We have made a huge commitment financially to research across the whole of the UK, and that will persist. As far as the Horizon programme is concerned, we're dead keen to join, but her question is better directed at our European friends.
Alicia Cairns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I visit schools in my constituency, it's quite rightly often to discuss climate change, and I'm so proud of the passionate and smart young people across Rutland, Melton, the Vale and Harbour villages. But I am concerned by the anti-dairy, anti-meat and frankly anti-farmer narrative that I'm starting to see, where students and children of farmers feel they're being silenced and can't speak out in support of their families who feed our country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very alarmed, as a rural member myself, very alarmed to hear the Honourable Lady's stories, and she is right that we should be encouraging schools to educate children about where food comes from, and indeed about the very high standards that UK farmers produce, not least in animal husbandry. But there is a way, I have to say, to intrigue and make children curious about some of the challenges to climate change that's brought about by farming. Not least, I have to say, I read recently about an additive made from seaweed you can add to dairy cows' feed, which reduces the amount of methane that they produce. It's in operation, I gather, very effectively in Australia and being looked at in this country too.
Kate Green.
Around 20,000 primary school children in 76 primary schools in Trafford benefit from the primary school sports premium. This is especially important after COVID, which we know has had a more detrimental impact on the physical agility and participation of the poorest children. Will the government commit to extending that premium beyond this academic year?
The Honourable Lady knows I'm a huge admirer and fan of her, which maybe she won't put on any election leaflets. But what I can tell the Honourable Lady is something, that the PE and Sports Premium is something that's very important to me, especially after that fantastic victory from the Lionesses, who really set the tone with that great work about how we want to make sure sport, particularly football, is more accessible to no matter what your gender, race or anything else. So it's so important that we make sure we get this right. I am fully committed to working with the Department for Health and Social Care and the Department for Culture, Media and Sport to make sure that we get that premium, and I'm more than happy to meet the Honourable Lady to discuss it further.
Debbie Hines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the end of the first full T-level cycle, can I commend colleges, including Alton College in my constituency, for their work with employers? What more can be done by ministers across government to encourage more employers to come forward, to offer up industry placements, to invest in the talent pipeline, both for their own good, but also for the good of our entire economy and society?
Minister.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for his question and also thank his college. The colleges have been doing amazing work, and the sixth form provisions that have been rolling out these T-levels. And it is amazing. I'll just give an example before I go on to your question. Topicals. All right, okay. I visited local, on results day, I visited a local college, and it was amazing. I wish I could bottle that enthusiasm. But the key, you're right, is working with local businesses and industries, and this is why the whole programme was designed with industries in mind.
Manira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. One school leader told me last week that one of his schools is preparing to offer evening meals to children whose families are struggling to put one on the table every evening. Yet with 9 out of 10 schools predicting a deficit by next September, few can afford to be so generous. Now, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, assuming it's the same person next week, warns of efficiency savings to come. So will the Education Secretary be advising staff cuts, turning off the heating, or letting pupils go hungry?
State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, we recognise that schools are under significant pressure, as is most of society, and we have to work together to try and get through it in good shape. We will obviously be making representations to Treasury colleagues as we move towards a statement on Friday and indeed beyond about what those pressures are, so that the Chancellor and the new Prime Minister, hooray, are able to make choices within a priority framework which reflects the priorities of the government.
Michael Gove.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Ministers will be aware that at the weekend it was reported that the school in England, which has recorded the best Progress 8 measure, the best measure of how much value is added during time in the classroom, is Michaela School in Wembley. Michaela is a free school. It encourages students to study EBAC subjects, and of course it is Ofsted outstanding. The Labour Party opposed the creation of free schools, opposed the EBAC, and wanted to abolish Ofsted. What lessons can we learn from that?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend puts his finger on exactly the point, and he'll be pleased to know that only 10 days ago I visited Michaela School myself to see exactly what goes on there, having heard an awful lot about it, and indeed watched the very moving documentary about the work that is done there. I have to confess, though, to being rather alarmed by the aggression that school attracts from the wider educational establishment, particularly on social media. And while the head of that school is obviously very outspoken, she's outspoken because it seems she has a cause. And what was very gratifying at the weekend was to see that in the Progress 8 schools, she proved that she was right.
Mike Ainsbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite my private member's bill becoming law to reduce the costs of school uniforms, far too many schools have their heads in the sand. Logos upon logos, emblems upon emblems, just not responding to the requirements in the law. What are the ministers going to do about it?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I first of all congratulate the honourable gentleman on that Prime Member's Bill getting passed into law. I think it's a really important piece of legislation. The guidance is very clear. The schools should be considered about wanting their own branding, but making sure that it's done in a fair and sustainable way for households. If the honourable gentleman has any examples or wishes to meet to discuss this further so guidance can be given out to schools, more than happy to arrange that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I refer to my entry in the Register? Can I ask the Minister why are adoption figures continuing to fall?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the my honourable friend for his question. Actually, adoptions this last year have gone up, but it is on a lower trajectory. And one of the things that we have looked at, and one of the reasons, potential reasons for this, is in 2013 there was a court ruling which confirmed that adoption orders should be made only when there is no alternative provision. This has seen an increase in special guardianships. So, but obviously we will keep this under review because the time that it's taken for children to be we adopted has reduced, and we want to make sure that no child remains in care any longer than they need to, and we find supportive parents for those.
Marsha DeConnell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Off-rolling is a hidden crisis happening in some of our schools, with black schoolboys being disproportionately affected by this practice, with many only being given a few formal hours of teaching, if any at all. Now, we should be quite outright raised at this, given the attainment gap, but also the disproportionate numbers at which black children are being excluded from schools. So can I ask the Secretary of State, what action is he taking to tackle the crisis in off-rolling? And is he ensuring that all schools that are engaging in this practice are recording the numbers, including ethnicity, age and gender?
Minister.
Off-rolling is something that is totally unacceptable. No school should be doing that or using that as a method. Now, we have to also balance that very carefully by making sure the head teachers do have the power to, where there are unruly children, remove them from the classroom, which is the detriment, obviously, their impacts having detrimental impact on the other 29, for example, in the classroom. However, I'm more than happy to meet the Honourable Lady, again, to look at any examples that she can provide, where we can call schools and school leaders out who are using this tactic inappropriately, and the Department is monitoring it and taking this issue very seriously.
Thank you, Batsy.
School is one of the most successful schools in my constituency and in the country, and this is despite the majority of the school buildings being built pre-1958 and accommodating 3 times more pupils than was originally intended. Well, my honourable friend agreed to meet with me to discuss supporting Arden School's proposal for investment through the school rebuilding programme, and so we can support Arden School be the best that it can be.
Minister.
My honourable friend is a doughty champion for the constituency of Meriden, and indeed for this school rebuilding programme. He'll understand that the bid is in and there's a process that the department must go through, so I can't comment, but I'm more than happy to arrange a meeting with my noble friend Baroness Barron, who is the Minister responsible for this portfolio area.
Mr. Speaker, why has the Secretary of State dropped the schools bill?
State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as you will know, the legislative timetable is under review, or was under review under the legislative timetable was under review of the previous Prime Minister. We wait for the opinion of the new Prime Minister as to what his priorities may be in the months to come, but for the moment we'll have to wait and see what he has to say.
We go to Stephen Metcalfe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I hope the House knows, I'm a passionate supporter of the power and creativity of engineering and its ability to address the most serious challenges we face globally. Will my right honourable friend therefore agree to look at the curriculum for opportunities to improve the teaching and understanding of engineering?
Minister.
My honourable friend will know that the department may, in March 2022, introduce the Engineers Teach Physics programme, which is to help the recruitment of high-quality engineers into our workforce. And because of the success of this pilot, has been extended across the country nationally into the 2023-2024 recruitment cycle. But more than happy to see how more we can make sure STEM is absolutely driven through the heart of our curriculum, alongside, of course, EBAC, which is absolutely vital to helping educate everyone.
State is as concerned as I am about the number of children attending school who are hungry. I wondered therefore if he'd made any representations to the Department of the DWP in terms of raising the threshold in terms of the household income of $7,400 in order to be eligible for free school meals.
Tuesday.
Mr. Speaker, as you would expect, we're in constant conversation, not just with the DWP, but with Treasury about the impact of the global fight against inflation that so many families are having to face. It would be wrong for me to front-run what may be announced on Friday, but she can be assured that we constantly bring pressures on the families that are putting kids into school and on schools in front of colleagues.
Siobhan Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Even the drama in this place does not match the daily drama of the childcare juggle. So we have to listen to millions of mums and dads who are asking for affordable and flexible childcare options in a system that's effectively not fit for purpose. Will my right honourable friend reassure parents and early years educators that the department is looking at this very closely, and will he work with the think tank Onward and I to bring about new reforms?
Secretary of State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable lady is quite right that the current childcare system we have, not through anything other than an accident, if you like, of increasing numbers of ministerial initiatives, has become complicated to the extent that there is not enough availability, it's not affordable enough, and it's not flexible enough. So, for example, some of the payment mechanisms are complex, not least tax-free childcare, and so we haven't seen the take-up that we expected to see when it was first introduced. We are reviewing the entire process from end to end at the moment, and she can be assured that we'll be looking not just to tinker, but hopefully, with the blessing of the new Prime Minister, something that will really provide a reform system to give her and other parents exactly what they're looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on Friday I received an email from the acting head teacher at Ray Primary School in my constituency. She said many of our children are hungry. Our cookers provide them as much food, but the children want more. This tells me that children must be missing out on food at home. We are going to provide bread at school, but the school needs more money. Mr. Speaker, I've listened to the Secretary of State this afternoon answer many questions in terms of the cost of living crisis that parents are facing. But parents and teachers cannot wait. What more can the Secretary of State do to address this now?
Just say to the honourable lady, please, these are topics. Other people want to get in. We're going to actually pass the time now. Secretary of State, we've got to help each other.
The honourable lady will understand, and I know she's a fantastic champion for her constituents, that this is a very serious issue, the current global economic state. And inflation is not something that's unique to this country, but we've seen it at 17%, for example, in Holland, 10.9% in Germany. So we are very aware of the pressures on households. That's why the £4 billion front-loading from the spending review has been so important, the additional funding for National Tutoring Programme, Recovery Premium, Catch-up Premium, the £2.5 billion for Pupil Premium, and the Free School Meals Programme as well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fairer funding has been a manifesto commitment for our party on many occasions. I've campaigned for it for the backbenchers and tried to deliver it from the front bench. Whatever the timing of legislation, can the Secretary of State confirm that a direct national funding formula is a legislative priority for his department?
I can confirm that work is well underway on exactly that.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The independent review of children's social care highlighted the cost of failure of residential care settings, both the cost financially, but most importantly, the cost to children of failed care. So what steps is the Secretary of State taking to improve that care and ensuring we move from a marketised system into a regional system as suggested?
Minister.
Thank you. As the honourable lady is aware, we are currently evaluating the 3 reports that were issued earlier on in the year, particularly the independent review into children's social care. I have been working flat out since I was appointed in this role to make sure that we are able to bring forward a response to that with an implementation plan to make sure that all young people in our care system are looked after, but there are also answers and options to move forward.
There are children all over this country, quite a few of whom are in my constituency, who are being home educated by parents who unfortunately themselves cannot read or write. What are we going to do to make sure that we value the education and the life chances of every single child and we don't leave these home educated children behind?
So State.
Mr. Speaker, while it is absolutely the right of parents to decide to educate their children at home should they so wish, as a society we have a duty to make sure they're getting exactly the kind of education that everybody else is getting too. And I'd be more than happy. I know this is an issue that the honourable gentleman has championed in many other forums and that particularly affects his constituency, and I'd be happy to hear his ideas on how we may go further.
British Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, has the Secretary of State looked at the full potential of education technology to improve performance in schools? Other countries are using it in more sophisticated ways than we do. Has he looked at it?
Mr. Speaker, we want the education sector to have access to the best-in-class technology because schools need reliable internet, to deploy it. That's why we're spending £232 million to improve school internet connectivity by 2025.
Order, order.